I want to talk to you today about a woman who stands alone. A woman who refuses to be defined by circumstances. A woman who knows that even when people walk away, God stands closer than ever before. See, there are times in life when we feel isolated, overlooked, misunderstood. Maybe you've given your best in a relationship, but it didn't work out. Maybe people you trusted turned their backs on you. Maybe you've had to walk through seasons of loneliness, wondering, God, why am I by myself? But I want to remind you today, you are not alone. When you feel like you're standing by yourself, God is standing right beside you. He says in His Word, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews 13:05. Sometimes God will remove certain people from your life, not to punish you, but to position you. He knows that if they stayed, they would have held you back. He knows that if you kept depending on them, you wouldn't depend on Him. See, there's a blessing in standing alone. That's when you hear God the clearest. That's when your faith is strengthened. That's when you learn that God is not just the God of the crowds, the God of the celebrations. He's the God of the midnight hour, the God of the silent seasons, the God who sees your tears and turns them into triumphs. There are moments in life when we feel completely alone. Maybe you've been through a tough season. People have walked away, relationships have ended, or you've found yourself facing battles no one else seems to understand. In those times, it's easy to wonder, God, where are you? Why do I feel so isolated? But I want to remind you today, God is closest when you feel alone. See, the enemy wants you to believe that loneliness means abandonment, that just because people have left, God has too. But the truth is, God never leaves. His Word says in Deuteronomy 31:6, the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Even when it feels like nobody sees what you're going through, God sees. Even when it feels like nobody hears your prayers, God hears. Sometimes God allows seasons of isolation because He wants to deepen your relationship with Him. When everything is going great, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to depend on people, on routines, on what's comfortable. But when you're alone, that's when you hear God the clearest. That's when your faith grows stronger. When you develop a level of trust in God that can't be shaken. Think about Jesus. Before He started His ministry, He spent 40 days alone in the wilderness. No crowds, no disciples, just Him and God. That season of solitude was necessary. It prepared Him for the miracles, for the impact, for the destiny God had for Him. In the same way, when you're alone, it's not because God has forgotten you. I love the story of Hagar in the Bible. She was abandoned, left in the wilderness with no hope. She had no one to turn to, no place to go, but in that lonely place, God showed up. He spoke to her. He provided for her. He reminded her that she was not forgotten. And do you know what she called Him? El Roy, the God who sees me. Maybe today you feel like you're walking through your own wilderness. You're wondering why certain people walked out, why certain doors closed, why you feel like you're standing alone. But can I tell you, you're not alone. God is right there beside you, working behind the scenes, strengthening your spirit, preparing you for what's next. This season is not a setback, it's a setup. The loneliness you feel today is temporary, but what God is doing in your heart is eternal. He's drawing you closer, giving you wisdom, building your faith. And when the time is right, He will bring the right people, the right opportunities, the right breakthroughs into your life. So don't be discouraged. You are never truly alone. The one who created the stars, the one who holds the universe together, He is holding you. Keep trusting, keep believing, because God is closer than you think. Loneliness is one of the hardest things to go through. It can feel like a heavy weight, like something is missing, like you're walking through life by yourself. Maybe you've experienced seasons where people you loved walked away, where doors you prayed for never opened, where you looked around and felt like nobody truly understood what you were going through. In those moments, it's easy to wonder, God, why am I alone? Why did this happen? But what if I told you that loneliness isn't always a bad thing? What if instead of being a sign of rejection, it's a sign of preparation? Sometimes loneliness is not a punishment. It's a divine setup. God doesn't waste anything. If He allows you to walk through a season of solitude, it's because He's doing something in you. He's strengthening you, refining you, positioning you for what's coming next. Some of the greatest transformations happen in the quiet seasons. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He had big dreams, a calling on his life. But before he could step into his destiny, he had to go through a season of isolation. His own brothers betrayed him. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and left in prison. For years, it seemed like he was all alone. But what looked like a setback was actually a setup. God was positioning him, molding his character, preparing him for the palace. And when the time was right, Joseph went from the prison to the throne, stepping into the leadership role God had planned for him all along. The same is true for you. Maybe you've been praying for God to open certain doors, but instead you felt like everything is closing. Maybe you've been believing for the right relationships, but you keep finding yourself alone. But can I tell you, God knows what He's doing. He's not just concerned with where He's taking you. He's concerned with who you are becoming. If He has you in a season of solitude, it's because there's something He wants to do in your heart first. Sometimes if God gave us the blessing too soon, we wouldn't be ready to handle it. If He brought the right people into our lives, before we learn to rely on Him, we might make them our source instead of Him. That's why He allows the lonely seasons, to teach us to trust Him fully, to develop our faith, to prepare us for the next level. So don't despise this season. Don't look at your loneliness as a sign that something is wrong. It may be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. God is setting you up for something greater. He's taking you deeper in your faith, strengthening your spirit, and positioning you for opportunities you can't even see yet. When the time is right, the right doors will open, the right people will come, the right opportunities will appear. Until then, trust that your loneliness is not a mistake. It's a divine setup for your destiny. Life has a way of testing our strength. There are moments when we feel overwhelmed, when the weight of responsibilities, disappointments, and struggles seems too heavy to carry. Maybe you've been through situations that left you drained, times when you didn't know how you would get through. You might have faced heartbreak, financial struggles, health challenges, or battles that nobody else even knows about. In those moments, it's easy to feel weak, to think, I don't have what it takes. I don't know if I can do this anymore. But here's the good news. Your strength doesn't come from you. Your strength comes from God. Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. That means you don't have to rely on your own power. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. When you feel weak, God is your source of strength. Think about David in the Bible. He faced challenge after challenge, fighting lions and bears as a shepherd boy, standing against Goliath, running from King Saul, and later leading a nation. There were moments when he felt completely worn out. But in 1 Samuel 36, it says, David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He didn't get his strength from people. from his circumstances or from his own abilities. He found his strength in God. The same is true for you. You may feel like you're at your breaking point, but God is saying, I am your strength. I am your refuge. I will carry you through. When you don't have the strength to keep going, He steps in and gives you what you need. Maybe you've been trying to do everything in your own power, pushing yourself to the limit, feeling exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed, but God never intended for you to carry it all by yourself. He says in Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Rest doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting God to renew your strength. It means surrendering your worries, your fears, and your struggles to Him, knowing that He is in control. When life knocks you down, don't rely on your own strength. Lean on God. Let His presence fill you with peace. Let His promises remind you that you are not alone. He is working behind the scenes, fighting your battles and preparing the breakthrough you've been praying for. So stand strong today. Not in your own ability, but in God's. He has brought you this far, and He is not going to leave you now. No matter what you're facing, remember this: you are stronger than you think, because God's strength is working in you. Keep believing, keep trusting, and keep moving forward. Your victory is on the way. Hagar's story is one of pain, rejection, and ultimately divine encounter. She was an Egyptian servant in Abraham and Sarah's household, caught in a situation she didn't choose for herself. When Sarah couldn't conceive a child, she gave Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, and Hagar became pregnant with Ishmael. But instead of feeling honored, she found herself in the middle of jealousy, mistreatment, and rejection. Sarah, feeling insecure and resentful, treated Hagar so harshly that she ran away into the wilderness alone and afraid. Imagine how Hagar must have felt. Used, unwanted, discarded. She had no family, no status, no one to protect her. She was pregnant, vulnerable, and unsure of what would happen next. Maybe she thought, this isn't fair. I didn't ask for this. Now I have nowhere to go. Have you ever felt like that? Like life threw you into a situation you never asked for. Like you were abandoned, overlooked, or struggling with pain that no one seemed to understand. In Genesis 16:7, it says that the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the wilderness. That means God was searching for her, watching over her, even in her lowest moment. And when the angel spoke, he didn't just tell her to go back. He gave her a promise. He told her that God would bless her son Ishmael, that she was not forgotten, and that her future was in God's hands. In response, Hagar did something remarkable. She gave God a name. In Genesis 16:13, she called him El Roi, which means the God who sees me. What a powerful revelation. Up until that moment, Hagar probably felt invisible, like no one cared about her pain. But in that wilderness, she realized something life-changing. Even when people reject you, even when life pushes you into isolation, God still sees you. He knows your struggles. He understands your pain. And He is working behind the scenes on your behalf. Later in her story, in Genesis 21, Hagar found herself in another desperate situation. After Isaac was born, Sarah demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Once again, she was forced into the wilderness, this time with her son. They ran out of water, and she believed their story was over. But just when she thought all hope was lost, God showed up again. Genesis 21:19 says, then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. The answer was there all along. She just needed God to reveal it to her. That well was a reminder that God is the provider, even in the dry places. Hagar's story teaches us that God never abandons us. Even when people turn their backs, Even when we feel lost, He sees us. He speaks to us and He provides for us. If you're walking through a wilderness today, remember, El Roy is watching over you. Keep trusting Him, because your well of blessing is closer than you think. There are moments in life when we feel stuck, like we've been waiting forever for a breakthrough that hasn't come. Maybe you've been praying for healing, believing for a new job, standing in faith for restoration in your family. You've done everything you know how to do, stayed faithful, kept a good attitude, trusted God, and yet nothing seems to be changing. The enemy would love for you to believe that it's never going to happen, that things will always be the same, that your prayers aren't working. But let me remind you today, your breakthrough is coming. Just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Behind the scenes, He's moving the right people into place, aligning circumstances, setting things in motion that you can't even imagine. The delays, the detours, the disappointments, they're not signs that God has forgotten you. They are just part of the process. Think about Joseph. God gave him a dream that one day he would be in a position of power, that he would be a leader. But instead of stepping straight into that promise, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Year after year passed, and it looked like nothing was working in his favor. But what Joseph couldn't see was that God was preparing him the entire time. Every challenge, every delay, every unfair situation was pushing him closer to his destiny. And in just one day, after years of struggle, he was promoted from the prison to the palace. That's how quickly God can turn things around. One touch of His favor, one shift in circumstances, and everything changes. What seemed impossible suddenly becomes possible. What felt delayed suddenly comes to pass. God is not limited by time. He knows exactly when to release your breakthrough. Maybe today you're at the point where you feel like giving up. You're tired of waiting, tired of believing, tired of holding on. But can I encourage you? Don't stop now. You may be closer than you think. In Galatians 6:9, the Bible says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Notice it doesn't say you might reap a harvest. It says you will. There is a set time for your breakthrough, and if you keep pressing forward, you're going to step into everything God has promised you. Stay in faith. Keep speaking life over your situation. Keep expecting God to show up. Your struggle is temporary, but the blessings coming your way are eternal. What God has for you cannot be stopped by delays, disappointments, or difficulties. When the time is right, you're going to see doors open, prayers answered, and breakthroughs beyond anything you imagined. Your waiting season is not wasted. Your breakthrough is coming. Keep believing, because God is about to do something amazing in your life. No matter what season you're in right now, whether you feel alone, stuck, or uncertain about the future, know this: God sees you, He is strengthening you, and your breakthrough is on the way. Loneliness is not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's often a divine setup for something greater. Your strength does not come from your circumstances, your resources, or other people. It comes from God. Just like He saw Hagar in the wilderness, He sees you. Just like He elevated Joseph from the prison to the palace, He is working behind the scenes in your life. So don't be discouraged by delays. Don't give up when things seem tough. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep pressing forward. At the right time, God will open the right doors, bring the right people, and release the blessings He has prepared for you. Your story is not over. The breakthrough you've been praying for is coming. Keep your faith strong because God is about to do something greater than you can imagine.